Welcome to the Unfinished Work Show. I am Mike Lake in this thing by myself. I still got a little bit of the old habit. I almost said poor podcast, but this is the Unfinished Work Show. Hopefully, we back and strong this week. Last week had a little bit of tech issues at the front half. If y'all see anything like that, just shoot me a message and let me know. But we could go ahead and talk about identity. I thought it was important that I covered, especially in the first weeks. Last week was about accountability. That was something that I addressed with myself. It was something that, well, I mean, I kind of went over it last week, but in case it was missed due to the whole tech issue, um, it was just something I evaluated within myself to say, where can I improve? And not that I was doing bad or anything, but I felt like, I always felt like, a man should be evaluating himself to see where he can improve. Um, with that being said, it starts with that accountability and then it moves over into what I would say is identity. Because once you figure out what's wrong, then you have to figure out where you stand and where you want to move to before you start taking steps. I guess you can call this the planning part of the changes. You can go to open it, bro. Yeah, just go ahead. Um, got my homie Hernan in the building. We doing bear the image after this. So he's always going to be in the building. If y'all want to check that out, that's another podcast on you'll find it wherever you find it. Look at my IG bio. But anyway, back to unfinished work. So in the planning phase of things, when you're evaluating and you're seeing what it is that you got going on, it's not really that hard for you to say, um, first I can hold myself accountable, but then immediately after that, start walking in the wrong direction because you didn't have a good self check to see who you were, like who are you and who do you want to be. A lot of people I've even seen, in fact, go the wrong direction because they believe they're this thing. They might identify as whatever. Um, if you identify as the tough guy, for instance, and you go down a path thinking you're going to be a boxer or MMA fighter or something, and you jump in that ring with the real ones and get sent get sent out the ring like Martin did on, on that episode where he was all lumped up. Really having a wrong self identity could lead you down the wrong path. I mean, to use that same phrase, if you're in the wilderness and you know, like, I'm not that guy, I'm not the wilderness guy, I'm a city boy. I'm not gonna get out there acting like I'm Davy Crockett or something. And hey, let me lead the group and guys follow me. I know where we're going. And I'll have us down the mountainside rolling down, going the wrong, like totally the wrong way, half dead or something, needing to be rescued just because I didn't know who I was. So identifying, should I use a word to define the word? Looking at yourself and then taking stock on who you are to determine your identity. I was going to say identifying yourself helps you identify. That's kind of ridiculous. But in any case, this whole episode is going to be about identity. Similarly, these conversations that I have here on the Unfinished Work Show, you're going to hear me say a lot that I learned this from my dad. And then even me as a dad raising my son, I'm sure he'll tell you the same thing that he learned it from his dad. But a lot of times in the teen years, I would say when identity becomes one of the bigger, I would say, issue points for most people. That's kind of when you slide into that space where you have to figure out who you are because you're not a kid, but you're not an adult. You're in that in between space, but you also don't know enough to really kind of make a fair determination of what's what. And then you're dealing with all these other um, variables such as groupthink, peer pressure. Uh, I was going to say politics, but like school politics, you got gender interaction. There's a lot happening in your teen years where you don't really have a fair fighting chance. And for those people that don't have both parents, or if both parents aren't present or attentive, they can fall into some weird spaces. And it's not always bad, but we're gonna highlight the bad ones. You got people taking on life of crime because it looked cool, because Grand Theft Auto says so, or because rap says so. Um, you got people uh, jumping into, let's say, promiscuity because that's the cool thing to do. Certain ways of talking, certain ways of dressing. Uh, I don't have to tell y'all. For the most part, all y'all have been teens, or if you are a teen and you're watching this, uh, sit down and listen. But the general idea is that there should be somebody, if not a parent, a mentor, a teacher, community leader, somebody there to give you just some lay of the land. And I actually, that quick runoff list, I didn't even have that in mind to say. I quickly thought I had a face to every one of those titles that I named for myself that that influenced me in some way. I had great people in my life like Pastor Lane, who was tough, but he was always like not only a religious leader, but he was the kind of guy who could say the right thing to cut all the way through, past all the nonsense, past all the posturing, and get right to your core. People like Coach Modro, if y'all played football at Blake High back in what between '99 and '01, you know Coach Modro. His saying was, "It's hard, but it's fair." Another mentor of mine, Mr. Gilliard, math teacher and African studies teacher, another mentor of mine. And I had all these mentors, and pretty sure I'm leaving out a bunch of people, but I had all these mentors on top of an amazing father and on top of living literally with my grandfather too, who himself was an educator. So just being blessed as I was to be surrounded by such good men, and in my case all those happen to be black men, but they don't have to be your same race, just somebody who's willing to show you what's what, cut through the nonsense, cut through the posturing, cut through what you believe is who you are, and really tell you what the world looks like, and how somebody like you fits in it. um if, like I said, not everybody has both parents, but big brother, big sister exists. There's organizations that help you get mentors and older peers or OGs or whatever you want to call them to help you out and put you on the right path. Now that's for the younger audience. For the younger audience, for you older folks, you can get mentors. You can pay for coaching. You can seek community leaders. There's pastors and group leaders and things of that nature that you can sit down with. But it's going to be a lot harder trying to tell somebody who's 30, let's use my age, 37, that the identity they exist in ain't real, and cut through. It's a lot more there to try to cut through. But it's not impossible. And that's why there's shows like the Unfinished Work Show, where you have somebody who's been through it. You have somebody who, I wouldn't say is above it, but is actively in the process of improving and trying to give y'all the what's what on how I'm starting to make these changes, and ask y'all to walk through it with me. Uh, because not only because it's lonely out here, but just because it's easier to work better when you got a team. Insert corny team cliche from any movie, but the general idea is that when you build a community of people building the same thing you're building, you ain't got to build it by yourself. You don't have to change yourself. You can change as a group. Just put yourself in a positive group dynamic. Now, I wanted to talk about some of the different levels of identity. Excuse me. Some of the different levels of identity. Got the sniffles. Um, while I was doing research, I kind of ran into, and some of these you may already know and be familiar with. You might even be a part of them. But identity exists in a lot of different ways. It's what you tell yourself and who you are. It's also what other people tell you who you are, and sometimes who you sign up to be for those people. An example would be like the stoic father who never shares his feelings, and he just sits in his office and builds things. That guy tells himself that there's no time for his pain, and partially he's right. Um, but also he could seek help in other ways. Could notice that I keep pushing it off of the self and put it on the team. There's therapy, there's other people, there's groups, there's whatever you going through, whatever you got going on. You ain't got to do it by yourself, even if you don't want to put it on your family. But anyway, self identity, what you tell yourself you are, sometimes what you sign up to be for other people. There are brands that help form who our identity is. The irony of, I didn't plan this, but like I'm wearing a Lakers hat. If you know me, you know I've been a Lakers fan my whole life, and a part of that is what my identity is. It's how I conduct myself in the sports space. Everybody know the different fan bases and how they conduct themselves. What Yankees fans are like, what Philadelphia team fans are like, uh, and the sort. Your football team can determine a certain level of your identity. But back to brands. Apple versus Android. There's a whole internet's worth of memes and jokes about Androids and how they're poor. And I say they, even though I used to be one and still kind of identify as one. I switched to Apple for different reasons, but now I'm on Apple, and it does feel weird to talk to somebody on Android. That a part of that is part of my identity, and it was all a part of Apple's plan to create an ecosystem for us to exist in, and to shun those who aren't in it, to try to bring them into the same atmosphere. That capitalist idea of how do we keep people spending money here is wrapped up in a lot of people's identity. A lot of y'all getting the newest new iPhone and can't quite afford it. And I'm not talking about on loan from like AT&T. I'm talking about people really going broke trying to look like they got it so they can have a phone and not be laughed at or get dates or whatever it is that's happening to people out there in the streets. Another one is Nike. You got your athletic apparel, shoes, clothes, etc. That for whatever reason, and I'll be honest and talk about myself, Nike athletes to me, for some reason, just seem like they're the better athletes. I don't know why. Maybe I fell for the okey doke, but I grew up in an era where Nike was really pumping it hard, and they did have some of the biggest and best athletes, such as your Jordans and your LeBrons, and at some point Kobe, and that was all basketball players. But the whole football thing, even my new era, which side is on? My new era cap is a subsidiary of Nike. That Nike just has this whole aura of like, we're the best in sports. And as a kid who grew up in sports, I wear Nike stuff. I got Nike shoes, even though I never dunked. I got all kind of Nike gear, even though I'm not currently athletic, which is odd. But that's a part of my identity. It's who I grew up as. It's who I still live as. I feel weird when I wear Adidas, and I'm admitting that not everybody's exempt from the identity game. Like I'm sure some of y'all came in here like, oh, I know who I am. I know what I can do. But then you start really thinking about it and you subscribe to something. You take part in something that you kind of frown upon someone else for not. Imagine not watching a certain TV show and everybody go, you haven't watched whatever the show is. That's a part of your identity. You identify as that. Some people identify as cinephile. That's a movie lover. Some people identify as different things, and they look at the people who don't partake in it as less than for whatever reason, even jokingly. But anyway, back to it. There's political identity. Whew, man, that one's a deep one. I'm not going to dive too deep into. I'm just going to say, you know who you are. You know the conservatives, you know the liberals, and people identify as either or. And most people probably exist somewhere in the middle. But if you say you're one, then the people on the other side looking at you funny. Like you just showed the wrong ID card trying to get in the club. I just caught that comment. But identity is a funny thing. It it can be dictated by you, it could be dictated by others, or just what you participate in. One interesting thing I thought about during the research was how people can get mislabeled. That has to do more with prejudice. That your identity could be wrapped up in something like having an accent that you can or can't control, a skin color that you can or can't control, being of a certain height is a part of it. It just when I say mislabel, what I mean is somehow this thing becomes the thing that identifies you the most when it may or may not have anything to do with your actual personality. I think as I say this, a lot of you know common sense wise that no one's really gonna say that taller people are better leaders. But if you look at the research, people think that taller people make better leaders. If I asked you outright, you wouldn't agree with that. But the science says that a lot of people do. Um, I'm just checking out this comment from Dave. He said, so true. We should always have Paul in our lives. He's referring to Paul from the Bible, from the New Testament, a person that mentors and teaches us and that we can call anytime. I appreciate that, David. But yeah, so you could be mislabeled. Even the funniest one that I run into most recent is Christian. That title of what my belief is informs a lot of people or at least has them believe that it informs who they or what they know about me or how I conduct myself. That it comes with a certain stigma that there are hypocritical Christians, there are overcritical Christians, there are not practicing Christians. There's a lot of like stuff in there in the way certain Christians conduct themselves that as soon as you identify as one, you get labeled, and that mislabel could put you in a different boat depending on like if you're interviewing for a job or just meeting people or just going through your day-to-day life. So mislabels definitely harm all of us, especially if they're wrong. But still, people should they know you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but we all do it all the time. There's a bunch of other levels to that, but one that I find to be the most imposing on a young man's life, and this is just through my experience of being one, not knowing what your identity is could leave you open to a lot of different information, and that could take you down different paths. Let's say you have a blank slate, religious wise. It can open up the door for you to receive information, or people can tap into you a certain way knowing that you're a blank slate, and steer you different ways, whatever those ways are, whether it is to Jesus or away from Jesus to Allah, or uh, atheism, or even just totally out of the religious space and then to whatever. Like once you're blank and you don't know, the not knowing creates a curiosity that people can take advantage of. So not knowing what your identity is, and then there's like smaller ones, which I'm gonna just quickly move past these, like group dynamics, who you are in your group. It's interesting to kind of watch one person be like this guy when a certain group of people around, and then a totally other guy when a whole other group of people around, and that that gap in their identity has to cause them a little, or maybe it doesn't.
It was fine, but now it's
Yeah, I just got an alert said it just dropped.
yeah, it dropped on Twitch for a second, but then it came back on. That's why I didn't say nothing.
Uh-huh.
But now it's frozen.
Okay.
On both YouTube and Twitch.
It should be coming back now.
It's back. Yeah, it started
All right.
choppy. It's buffering, but it's coming back.
Not sure what that was. I still had total connectivity, direct connect with the Ethernet. My apologies for that. I'll get back to the point, which was when you have that gap between who you act like with a certain group of people and who you act like with another group of people. Um, that gap in your identity is a space where a lot of nonsense happens, and the first or biggest major step to self-improvement, like I said at the beginning, is knowing who you are. But a part of that might be addressing the lies that you tell yourself, and the distance between those two most likely is a lie. You're not the hood guy with the hood friends and the good guy with the good friends. You're probably somewhere in the middle, and you should play the middle if that's your true self, no matter who you with. And if you're a young man or even an older man and you fall victim to this, uh, you're never going. You're going to be on that carousel forever until you really sit down with yourself, not me. You sit down with yourself and you identify what that gap is and what lies are you telling in the middle, and bring those lies to the light. Now, when I say to the light, I don't mean that you have to confess outwardly to everybody, but it helps. What I really mean is kind of getting it out there on the forefront of yourself. Write it in your journal. Tell your therapist. Tell your girlfriend. I don't know. Tell somebody. But being able to bring the uncomfortable things up and address them properly will help you identify where you need to sit before you start going down a path of self-improvement. Um, I watched a couple videos, and I had them queued up, and I actually stupidly did it on my other computer and not the one that I'm using to stream. But I'll be better about that next week. One of the videos is from Jordan Peterson, who's an interesting guy. If you don't know who he is, look him up. He has some really edgy ideas in a lot of ways. And I found myself, when I first was introduced to him, criticizing him on the other show. But as I started to learn more about the dude, some of his takes are really well grounded. He's a psychologist, and I believe I don't know if he stands on this principle, but I know he's a Christian at least. But I hear him talking a lot about these different things. Neither here nor there. That he was talking about lies and why lies happen. That when you bend reality to your will, there's no real way that you can exist in that space, because you've made up a space where no one else is. That even if you sell that lie to the person you're lying to, that you yourself don't actually get to put in the real work, because you created this somewhat alternate reality where the story that you told exists. And a lot of people tell themselves stories that get them, that really kind of lock them in place. One of the most noted versions of that is when people play the victim in every situation, that person, whoever that person is, who you come up to ask and talk to, and they always got a sob story, or they always got something going on, somebody was doing something to them, is essentially lying to themselves. Because I don't know. I mean, my 37 years of living, I can't think of a streak of even two or three things happening that were actually people plotting against me to try to bring me down like I'm not important. But somehow this particular person, it's everything. It's the teachers when they were in school, it's the job when they was in the job. And me and one of the homies was talking about this earlier, which coincidentally tied into what I was talking about on the show today. But those people can make it through life, they can struggle through, they can fight and drag and blame everybody else and go. But if they really was being real with themselves, they couldn't really truly prosper or be comfortable until they face the fact that it's on you. And honestly, as a man, the reason I directed the show to the men is that I'm not a woman, but mainly because as men, nobody cares. That's might be sad to some of y'all, but really, it's the survival of the fittest ideal when it really comes to your minimal problems. Because if you run into a wall and it's somebody else's fault, what if that person, like, let's the larger they, when they say they did it, what if they told you, yeah, we did it, so now what? You playing victim, they confirm they victimize you, and now what? You got nothing. You just stuck in your seat because they put you there. That's what we doing. That's what you would do as a man. I know I wouldn't. I wasn't raised that way, and I didn't raise mine that way. That that's the point about nobody cares. It's, even if they were, so what? Beat them. Beat them at the game. Change the game. Leave the game. Do something for yourself to really get you past whatever victimology you going with. Even if it's systematic, even if it's the police, even if it's education or redlining and properties or business, or you trying to podcast and you can't market and promote your podcast because they don't like how you speak. Fix your speech or make your own space where you can talk like you want. But anyway, like I said, men, nope, nobody cares. And young men, if you haven't realized that yet, I told my son this often. Hey, son, I love you and I want to do everything for you, but I can't. And ultimately, when you get out here in these streets, nobody cares. So stop the lie, stop the self lie, stop the victimology, stop telling yourself these things and making up these grand stories. Because I think with a little more grace, which is on my shirt, but with a little more grace than this, but I'll form it in a reasonable way. When people start down the sob storyline, I'm gonna just start telling them, like, yeah, I think they were doing that to you. Now what? They were plotting against you. They did want to take you out. They did want you to lose your job. They did want you to be kicked out of that house. They wanted all of it because that's what they want. It makes them more money and it keeps you down. So they win, and they get to talk about the time they beat you because you're important. And I really wonder how those people are going to respond, whoever those people may be. Um, yeah, salute to the victims, and we'll move on from that. Uh, One thing that happens when you telling these falsehoods and you creating these narratives for yourself is an opinion gap. It's the gap between where your opinions, like you think your opinions matter, and the real actual reality. And with the advent of social media and where we are today, um, I think we all would agree, as y'all watch me on some form of social media, that social media is interesting. It in 19, let's say 40, everybody didn't have the ability to just like express opinions, um and really have those opinions validated by an audience, or people, hitting the like button telling them that the thing they thought matters. And that gap between the real life reality, it creates situations like when people tried to tell those doctors that the vaccine was something else, that people try to tell scientists that the earth is flat, that people try to invent new ways to keep the rich richer and the poor poorer, because they're smarter than the economists, that the government has all these master plans to tear down buildings and do all these crazy things because reasons I don't know. Like the government ain't already winning at the control war. But anyway, people didn't have a microphone. They couldn't just go buy a mic. They couldn't just set up a camera, throw on a podcast, talk for a long time, and build an audience that everybody thinks their point is important. And I'd say that treading lightly, knowing that right now, y'all could probably care less about my point. Um, and that's fine. I live by the nobody cares mantra too. Ultimately, nobody cares, but hopefully they'll watch and then tell me they don't care in the comments. Um, but yeah, having that opportunity to just share an opinion, to not vet anything, to not study anything, to not make yourself, like in the Socrates era where you had to be a guy who studied under somebody who mattered because that person proved that they studied, and then you formed an opinion based off your life knowledge or your experience that some 19-year-old could just be like, I believe, and then people have to like lean in and gather that information into their head that even at 37, I know I don't know enough. I could give you my advice, but I've never, especially on this show or even in real life, I'm never going to tell you what to do. I could just tell you based on my experience, here's what I'm doing or here's what I did. But there's a lot of people who do. There's a lot of people who think they're master chefs. There's a lot of people who think they're the best at. Let me ask you, and if y'all could reply in the comments, I see there's a couple more comments I have to get to. Um, you know, we've all seen it. We've seen the person who basically acts like the thing that they think is law because they're the loudest person in the room. And that if nobody's willing to argue with me, then I'm right. Or if nobody can prove me wrong, then I'm right. If nobody could beat me up, then I'm right. But you could do all of those things and still be wrong. And a lot of people are. Um, People hide behind these chat rooms and these avatars and they say these things. And the weird thing is, it's not like I'm saying it happening to me. They're not. That there's a situation where people bully people online, which is interesting when you let people you don't know form an opinion about you and let that opinion stick is a tough space for some of these younger people in the schools that they go to, in the worlds that they exist in. Back in my day, being social meant going to the football game on Friday. And I probably just made myself sound really old. But we had social media, it just wasn't, I mean, it was popping when it was popping. But on Friday, when the games is on, if you weren't playing or in the band, you was at the game. And then when you graduated, you still go to the games because that's where everybody was at. Then when you got old enough, you went out. That you really had to test these ideas in real life, and you can't hide behind an avatar and share them. But the danger in that and identity is being able to just create an identity. You could be an entirely other person, especially in a world like Meta, where you can join the metaverse and be a totally different, whatever, be a different gender, be a different person, change your voice, have Chat GPT type your responses. That the opinion gap is creating this weird cognitive dissonance. And if you never heard of cognitive dissonance, look it up, man. It's a deep idea about how people create inconsistent thoughts and beliefs and how far apart those are from reality. Cognitive dissonance. It it's crazy, man. I've witnessed it in real time. I've been talking to people and watched them just kind of make this sub world, this matrix version of what's happening up. And you almost just gotta chuckle like these these this is the world we live in. A world where your identity is what you want it to be, a world where you don't have to have a degree to vet anything. You ain't never had to build anything to say you built something. You can throw money at the situation and you can flaunt online. You can rent an expensive car and then act like it's yours only to have people follow you and do whatever it is you're trying to get them to do. Buy my clothing line because I have a fancy car. That this world creates identity gaps and it's hurting a lot of people. I'm sure if I looked it up and I didn't, there's a study somewhere that shows at this point in time in the 2020s, a person's ability to distance themselves from reality has to be so harmful that we now have apps for therapy, and we don't have people going to the tangible places where they can get some therapy. Like, you go to a therapist, go to a church, go to a grief group, or join a AA meeting, or NA, or Gamblers Anonymous. Do something where you're sitting with some other people and somebody with some education who can kind of give you a idea of where you rank on the scale of whatever, and then you can work from there to build yourself up. What is the point of all this? You can't change anything if you don't identify what the thing that needs changing is. When your identity is wrapped up in the wrong stuff, when you're acting out of character, when you're tap dancing around the problems, when you're being told, hey man, you got an issue, and you could easily just say, no, I don't, and you're just hating on me. When these things exist, when you have the ability to escape reality, your identity starts to become something else. And if you ever try to improve upon it, it'd be like building a sculpture out of a pile of crap. And that won't be worth anything. Fix your identity. Before I get out of here, I want to read some of the comments. And if anybody, honestly, this is an open response. If anybody ever wanted to join, um, how can I again? It's showing me. It's
After you say like 3 4 starts.
the crazy direct ether. It's this program. It's creeping back in now. Is it back yet? What you watching?
Oh, both.
Oh, okay. Stop it. It stops the stream. All right, it should be back now. Sorry about that. Not sure what's going on. I got direct ether connection. I think it's my software. I'm gonna have to address this more directly with with the admins. But let me know if I am back. I believe I'm back. I should be back. Okay, so comments. I appreciate it, man. Thank you. Oh, okay. So you just saw me sitting there and just contemplating like like a bum on a log. So Dave said that some people identify with a disease that's attacking them. I'm a diabetic or I'm bipolar, but then again, that's not who they are. That's what they have. And he agreed that people should stop the lies. I think there's more to that comment. Let me throw it up here on the screen. Nope. They are in. That's all it said. Um, in any case, next week I'm gonna have more for y'all. I'm not sure what the topic is gonna be. I usually try to sit down with it and see where I want to go next. But if y'all have some ideas, I'm more than open to touch on them. I would like to hear from y'all. One of the goals of this show, let me change that phraseology. One of the points of this show is to create a community of people working toward their goals. And I'm curious, what y'all working on? I got some things I'm gonna be working on here soon. Well, I've already been working on them. I'm gonna bring it into more tangibility. Uh, One of the more comical ones I'll say is I'm gonna join. I'm gonna do a fitness thing. I'm gonna have y'all hold me accountable to my fitness goals. And if any of y'all want to join me on that, um, hit me up. That's one of them. But there's a host of others. If you feel comfortable enough to share here in the comments, do, or just text me. Oh, before I go, I wanted to tell y'all. Whew, this hit me hard earlier, and I meant to tie it in, and I kind of got on a little rant when I was talking about ID. One of the interesting things of identity I ran into today. This happened while I was out at work. I ran into this guy. So I saw this guy near where I was working at. And if you know me, you know what I do. He was just there sleeping on a bench with his family. Very heartbreaking situation to see this man on the bench, huddled up with his family as far as his arms could reach to embrace them while they sleep at 6 in the morning on a bench in Tampa, Florida. And it was him, what I believe to be his wife, three, it was two little girls that he had in arm. There was one little girl in a stroller and another kid, like 9-year old boy sitting on the ground. And I saw it. It was just one of those things you kind of see in passing. I'm doing my job and I have to carry on. I'm driving. And as I'm driving away, I start to break down. I actually got emotional just thinking it felt like a pursuit of happiness moment where Will was in the bathroom with his foot door, watching this man just whatever life gave him, he down bad. It gave him who it gave him it hit him hard because clearly I from the ages of the kids, I was like, they're not like a permanently homeless family. This looks recent. And why are they out here? Where they don't have a vehicle, a house, family members, nothing like that. So it started to really hit me hard, and I really felt convicted in those, let's say, 20 minutes as I was continuing on with my job. And I was talking to my fiance about it, and I was like, I can't not do nothing here. And I know that's bad English, but that's what I said. Um, I almost started to cry. I was welling up, and it was rough to just be playing it back in my head that this dude was half asleep on the half awake kind of thing. Some other homeless guy walked by and he kind of looked up. The man's trying to protect his family, but something went wrong, and clearly he's down bad. He's out on the streets. So when I get done doing what I was doing, I swung back over there and I went and I sat with him. I offered him and his family some food. And I'm not telling y'all this as a brag at all. In fact, they declined. They had just ate. I guess they ate in the time since I had left. Um, but we just sat down and talked. I just wanted to just sit with him and talk with him, ask him, was there anything I could do? See if I could connect them with somebody to help 211 or anything. And I reached out to one of the leaders at my church, and I really quick, and the situation is something we can do. He provided me with some resources to pass off to the guy connected, and it was it was a lot, like, to just be sitting in the presence of somebody who needed help and be able to try to offer it. But the thing that surprised me, and the way it ties into this week's episode, is I had the entire narrative in my head, and clearly I was right. I mean, they were sleeping in the car, and the car caught fire, the engine caught fire, or whatever. Couldn't get it repaired. He still owed payments on it. They are in a season of their life where life is really kicking at them hard. And we talked, and we chopped it up. We made some jokes back and forth. He asked me some questions. We talked about Tampa, my church. He was up from Michigan, and he moved down here about a year ago. His wife has an interview tomorrow. I prayed that she gets that job because that family needs her to have that job, and then he can get a job, so they're not sleeping on the street with their young kids. These kids were all between like 9 and 2. Man, it was bad. But anyway, he never once played the victim. He never once lashed out. He never once looked it down and dejected that this man knows nobody cares, and whatever situations happen, and it's on him to get him up out of it. We talked about his next steps and his plan, and he got some stuff going with 211. He should have a voucher soon to get him a hotel until Section 8 is able to put them in a house. He called Child Protective Services on himself to try to get the kids some shelter in the meantime while him and his wife figure out whatever. And this man was really he it was man, I his problems are way bigger than anything that I thought I was dealing with. And he was just working a problem. And if that don't tell you who he thinks he is, he knows who he is. He knows what he signed up to be as a man, as a leader of his family, as the person who's supposed to provide and support. That he dropped the ball, but he was still working on it. And I'm gonna pray for that dude, and y'all should too. His name, I don't even remember his name. I think it was Anthony. I wrote it down. But in any case, hopefully the resources, that we provided him help him and them, and the prayers can help this man out. But if you thought she was going through something, I hope that story can put it into perspective that while you might have a headache, or you might not like your job, or you might feel like you're a little too fat, or the world's kicking you and the police keep bothering you, that this man really out on the streets with his family and 4 young kids, and he working a problem, so work yours. In any case, it's the unfinished work show. We got a lot more work to do, and I'll see y'all next week.